Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second instalment of our Botania mod series, where last time we got ourselves set up with all of these beautiful flowers that you can see around me. Which is all very well and good, but what are we actually going to do with them? And that is where this thing we made last time comes into play. So this is the petal apothecary. This is where we're able to mix up petals in order to make different flowers. It doesn't actually work in this dry state. It needs to have water in it. So what you can do is you can bring a water bucket to it and then right click and it will fill up with water just as you see. Now every single flower that you make is going to use up that water, so you will want to have a ready supply of water in the area. So I think I'm going to put that just here. I'm just going to dig myself down and make myself a little sort of water pool just here. Just like that. And so now every time we need to put more water into the apothecary, you can take the water back out, you can put it in the pool, we can take it from the pool, we can put it back into the apothecary. It's just a nice little continuous supply, so it's easy to restock this in the early game. But what do we actually do with this? So I need to be able to mix up petals in this little bowl. Over here I have already got some petals stored up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the most basic of recipes, and we're going to make a pure daisy. So I'm just going to take out my white petals. I'm also going to need some seeds, because that's what you use to finish a recipe. And if that makes no sense, just watch and wait. So all we need to do is we come over to the petal apothecary and we're just going to throw, pressing Q or whatever it is you've got bound to that action on your keyboard, and just throw that straight into the apothecary. And you can see there it is, floating around in there, our little white petal, and it's also showing us the recipe that we're creating just above the cursor. So we can throw another one in, we can see we've got 2 white petals, 3 white petals, 4 white petals. Aha! And now things have changed. It has shown us what we are able to make now that we've started creating this. And it's showing we can make that pure daisy just there by adding some seeds of some variety to it. You can see it sort of cycling through the different seeds that you can use. The answer is any of them. And so what we'll do is we will just throw in some wheat seeds. Boom! There we go. We have now completed our first flower. And there she is, one pure daisy. And this is the same as well for all of the other recipes, all of the other flowers that we can make. If we come over to JEI and we type in generating flowers, for example, this is going to be the next one we're going to be creating. We're going to make a hydrangea, but you can see it uses different petals in the petal apothecary, right the way up to Shogminot, which is starting to get into some more complicated stuff, but still made in that petal apothecary. But that's definitely getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, and for now, what are we going to do with our daisy? Well, what pure daisies do is they make the next most important thing from this mod pack, and that is a type of wood and a type of stone that you use to create the mana pools. So what I can do is I can plant my little daisy down there. There she is. And next to that, I'm going to place one little birch log, and we will see what is going to happen to this. As soon as you place it down, you'll notice that it starts getting the sparkly effect, the same as that you see around the flowers. And it'll take it a moment, but this is going to transform before our eyes. Boom. And there we go. So that took about a minute, maybe, I reckon, for that in order for that to change. And this has now created something called living wood. And what we can do is we can go all the way around this daisy in a block like we're creating a 3x3, if I had enough wood, and it'll be able to fill up that area, and then the daisy will be able to transform all of that into living wood. What it can also do is the same thing with stone. It can make living stone from standard stone. So if I pop that there as well, that's also going to get the wiggly particle effects. If you try to place a random block that's not something that it can transform, like bricks, then it'll just sit there, and you can see it doesn't have those particles around it because it can only do it with the natural stone, not anything that's been formed from it. That is the same as well if I make some strip planks or something and I place those down, that's not going to transform neither. Has to be the original, has to be a nice standard log, or it has to be original stone. But if I come back and I now just swap these ones out, I'll swap you and I'll swap you. Ooh, look, the living stone has already changed as well. And I place them down by the side, we'll be able to get ourselves a full ring. Around the pure daisy, this does only work in the absolute adjacent block. So I can't, for example, place a stone down there and it's still going to change. It must be pretty much touching that daisy. It's got to be in this 3x3 pattern. Let's take you back up again. And then wait for these two to change over. And there we go. So we've got this living rock that we can see here. This is this lovely sort of pale creamy colour. It's a really nice block to work with. And we've got the living wood. And if we then harvest these with our axe, so it's going to bring us up with some new recipes. And this is how we're going to make all of our mana related stuffs. So I'm just going to take these from around the daisy. And our rock as well, please. And then I'm going to replace this so that we can get a little bit of a supply of this going. Because you're only able to change over 8 blocks at a time around the daisy, it is well worth having several daisies on the go at once. Now, one thing to point out is that as you are making up flowers in an apothecary, if you put in too many petals, so for example, let me just start one off, I know that the daisy needs for me to have 4 of these white petals. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, well, I've gone way past it now, and you can see that I'm now not being shown the recipe to say that I can actually make the daisy. What you can do is if you right click on it with an empty hand, you will just take out the last petal or whatever it was that you put in. So I can go back down to 5, back down to 4. Now I can throw my seeds in to finish the recipe and make that daisy. There we go. And with all the daisies made, I can come out here, I can extend out my platform a little bit so that I've got plenty of space to be working with. Have a little bit more dirt out here. You do need to grow the daisies on something a daisy will grow on. So it's going to grow on grass and it's going to grow on dirt, but it's not going to grow on gravel, for example, nor is it going to grow on any of the different stone types, because you couldn't normally grow any kind of flowers there anywhere. So some form of dirt is going to be the way forward. And then I'm going to place down these daisies in a grid, skipping 2 in between, so I've got space just to lay down my stone or my wood. So 1, 2, daisy, 1, 2, daisy, 1, 2, daisy, 1, 2, daisy, and not that, daisy. Right, and now I can just surround all of these with either the wood or the stone and get a little bit of a production chain going. And how satisfying is all of that? So I can now just collect up all of this nice living wood, and then I will replace it with stone and get myself a load of living stone as well. And the same goes for the stone as well. So I can gather up plenty of this so that I've just got a little bit stored up. I'll try to get myself about a stack before I start making mana pools or anything like that. And in fact, do you know what? I think the first thing I'm going to do with all of this living rock is I'm going to make the next grade up of apothecary, just because, there it is, there's our living rock apothecary. That is a good looking bit of kit. In fact, I'm going to do that now, just so that I know that it's done. And you make new petal apothecaries in exactly the same way as you did the first one. So I'm just going to need to grab myself another petal, and then what you do is you can simply just use a different material in order to create it, which I believe looks like that with a petal at the top. Yep, there we go. And there we go, one living rock apothecary rather than the stone one. So let's get rid of you and replace it with that one. Hey, there we go. That looks much nicer, much more official. But when I've mentioned mana pools, and I think I've said it about 5 times during this episode so far, you might be wondering what on earth it is I am actually talking about. And the easiest way to show you is probably going to be to just make one. So we just need to come over to a regular old crafting bench, and then if we take our living rock, we can then use it to make a little sort of bowl shape, a bit like you're making a dog bowl, and that will give you a mana pool. And what this does is it allows you to store power. There is actually another type of mana pool. What you can do is you can use the living rock to make slabs, and then you can use the slabs to make a diluted mana pool. And this holds much, much, much less power in it. I'll make one for the sake of it, but generally I tend to just stick with using the standard mana pools. And what you can do is you can place these down, and these become a storage unit for mana, which is power in the Botania mod. And to demonstrate this, let's set up our first mana generator. So I'll take you back with me, because you're going to be necessary, and then I'm going to make our first generating flowers. And to do that, I am going to need blue petals, cyan petals, and some seeds, which I apparently don't have any of in this chest. Do I have any in here? Ooh, 2. I'm going to need more than that shortly. Anyway, let's have a go with making these up first of all. My bucket in there? Yes, it is. Good, right, so water into our apothecary, and then if we add in 2 of our blue petals, There we go. And then 2 of our cyan petals. It's come up with a new recipe for us, sowing this flower, which has got a sort of pair of blue pom-poms on it, which is the hydrangea. So if I then finish this off with some seeds, that's going to give us our new flower. And here he is. One hydrangea. Let's take him outside and have a little bit of a look at him. So, he is a very cheap little flower to make. He's got these very pretty little pom-poms, and it's one of the few things as well that will constantly generate mana for you without you having to constantly feed it. The only downside to these guys is that they have a very short lifespan. They only live for about an hour, but that's fine. At the moment they are nice and cheap to make, so we can just keep replacing them. And how these little guys work, if I just pick him back up again, is these drink water. So if I come over here to this nice big water source, I can't place it directly in the water, it'll just get washed away. If I try and put it there, it'll just get pushed off by the water. But what I can do is I can come away by 1 block diagonally. It can see water in any 3x3 area around it, much the same as the daisies up at the top, so it needs to be able to detect there's water in this area somewhere. And if I place him in there, you will start drinking water and then producing mana for us. And you can tell that it is because it's producing the little sparkles. All of these little blue wafty bits you can see coming off it says, I am currently making mana for you. But it's currently just sort of sitting in the flower. Now you might be looking at this and thinking, how can I tell that's actually doing anything? And the answer to that is to come back inside, and what we're going to do is we're going to use our living wood this time, and we're going to make a twig. As you can see, a rather fancy looking little twig. And then if we make another one, and another one, there we go, I can never quite remember that recipe. We have got a wand of the forest that comes up that we can create. And what this does is it uses 3 twigs, as we can see, 2 petals, and it gives us this rather fancy looking little bit of kit. And what this is going to allow us to do is read things. So if we now go back to our hydrangea, come back over here, we'll be able to see what it is doing in a little bit more detail. So if we just hover the cursor over there, we can see that there he is, he's sitting there, and it's got a nice full bar underneath it. So if I just take that away, sorry pal, I know you've done hard work, but I need to have a look at you again. Put him back in, and then hover over, we can see the bar is filling up. And that's filling up with mana. At the moment this is building up mana inside itself, it is storing it. But that's all well and good, but I don't want the mana to be in the flower, I want it to be in this pool. That way I can be storing large quantities of it, whereas the flower can only store a tiny amount. And if I just place this pool down, let's pop him just there. Nothing appears to be happening. Nothing is happening at all, in fact. This little hydrangea is still sitting full of mana, and my pool is still sitting very much empty. I need something to move the mana between the 2 of them, which luckily for us is indicated in the little sign next to the hydrangea. That brownish looking box with a red cross next to it, that is a mana spreader, and that is going to move the mana for us. And luckily for us, these are really cheap to make as well. They use a copper ingot, and I believe it's probably going to be a petal. 99.9% of things use petals. So if we come over here, yeah, there we go, it just flashed up. 1 mana spreader. So I'll take this one out, and then we'll go and place this in between our hydrangea and our mana pool. Just so that we can see it, I will pop it up on a block, go on a living block, because why not? If I put you up there, and then if we hover the cursor over the mana spreader with the wand of the forest in hand, we can see it there. It's currently firing mana off in this sort of direction, basically off into nowhere. And then what we can do though is if you crouch and right click on a functional flower or a generating flower, so in this case this hydrangea, generating flower, it will get a little box around it, and then you can right click again on the mana spreader to link the 2 together, and you'll see this sort of little zap of light that goes between them just to show you that they have linked. Also, we can now see that the hydrangea has no mana in it, and that the spreader is slowly gathering mana. That's the green bar that's underneath it, but at the moment it's got nowhere to send it to. So once again, we can just right click while crouched on the mana spreader, highlight that one, and then highlight the pool as well, and now it's going to send mana into the pool along that great blaring green blaze that you can see that comes from it. And now we're effectively transferring mana from hydrangea to spreader to pool. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, this is a kind of ideal setup. These flowers are cheap to make. This was easy to make, and so were you. Why do I ever need to expand anything beyond this? Well, unfortunately there are a few things which aren't so good. Number one, hydrangeas generate the puniest little amount of mana imaginable. It is absolutely tiny. Very few things are going to be able to run off this minuscule amount of mana building up in the pool. This mana pool holds 1 million mana, so it holds an awful lot of it, and as you can see, it's not going up. It's not going up at all. It's such a small amount of mana that is coming from this hydrangea. Also, they need to be in line with water, so if I place another one just there, it's not going to do any generating for us because it's not on the same level, the same plane as the water that's around it. Also, these actually eat water sources. So if I pop one in a hole just there, and I pop a water just in there, what it will do is it will eat that water, start generating mana, and then have no more water. Plop, gone. Ate all of that. It is currently generating a little bit of mana for us. Ugh. And that's all it made out of that whole water source block. It made that tiny little bit of mana, so barely even worth it. And for that reason though, you need to make sure that they are next to source blocks that are able to replenish themselves, so at least a 3x3 of water. So while hydrangeas might not be perfect, they certainly have their issues. They are cheap, and for now it is worth setting them up as a way of generating mana, just so that I can have a little bit going in the background. Right, so now I have 4 hydrangeas, all going in a row. All are linked up to this spreader, and you can see it is gathering mana very much faster, well, 4 times faster than it was with just one of them. And also my pool is still barely filling up. It's still really empty, just on one tiny little blip of mana. So, yeah, these will slowly work up in the background, but they are definitely not a quick way to get power. That being the case, let's have a look then at the next generating flower and see if that can do a little bit better for us. So if we come into here, come into good old JEI, let's have a look at generating flowers. There's our hydrangea, there's the next one along, the Enderflame. Mr. Enderflame, what do you take to make? 2 brown petals, a red one and a grey. Nice and cheap, let's get you made up. So that was 2 brown petals, 1 red one and a grey. There he is, there's the recipe for our Enderflame and some wheat seeds just to finish it off. And there we go, we now have our next generating flower. And then what we can do is we can place you down just in here so that we can have a bit of a look at you. So this is the Enderflame, and what this is going to do is it is going to generate mana in quite a different way really from the hydrangeas that are out there, because what this does is it consumes items. So if I give it something combustible, so it's going to want either something made out of wood, a log for example. It'll eat a stick from me, it'll also take a nice piece of charcoal from out of there, and then what it'll do is it will take the item away and it will be able to eat it. What it won't do is, for example, consume the wood from this building. Even though this is perfectly combustible, it could be used to smelt something down in a furnace. This flower isn't just going to sort of snaffle it away from your walls and leave you with a big hole somewhere. It has to be in some form of item function, sitting on the ground like that so that it can eat it. And there we go, I'll happily eat that stick, thank you very much. And what you will also notice is that 1, the item disappeared, and 2, the flower got little particles around it whilst it was generating mana. So if I chuck it one of these logs, it should be able to eat that as well. And then it generates all these nice little fiery particles to say, I am currently making mana. And if I hover over this with our Wand of the Forest, you'll see that it's got a little bit of mana in there already. So it's currently building its mana stores up, but again, because it's not linked to a spreader, it's just sitting inside the flower. What I should be able to do though is give it this piece of charcoal, and it should just have space to eat that one as well. Whoop, there we go, that has completely filled it up with mana. It now won't be able to eat anything else. And so what we can do though is we can run back outside with our flower, back over towards our mana pool, which is... Oh, we've got 1 more tiny little blip of mana in there. Well done, hydrangeas. You are actually doing something. But hopefully this will speed things up a little bit. Let's clear some space out here. And then what we'll do is we will place our flower down. You can go just there. That will be absolutely fine. place down another mana spreader. I'm going to put you on this log. You can go up there, and I'm going to link you up to our mana pool as well. There we go. So now both of these spreaders are feeding this one mana pool. Then this Ender Flame currently isn't linked to the spreader, so again, remember, you can crouch, right click, and then right click on a spreader, and now these two are linked. So we can see the little spreader symbol there has got its green tick next to it. Now when I feed you, at the moment you're not sending any mana, when I throw you a bit of charcoal, munch munch, there we go. You are now generating much more mana, and you can see how quickly that is ticking up in comparison to how quickly that one did when it was only feeding off hydrangeas. These guys produce very much more mana on a sort of second by second basis. The only downside to these guys, of course, is they need to be fed. They need to be fed something which is combustible pretty much as soon as they have run out. So you're currently out. There you go. Have another one over there. They can take items from a fair space around them. I believe it's at least 4 blocks away. They should be able to pick it up. But I do need to have a system where I can constantly feed this thing something that burns. And luckily for us, it is a case of basic redstone to the rescue. All I need is for something to sit in the vicinity of this flower that it can pick up and eat without disappearing and then be replenished as soon as it has gone. So we can do that just using a dropper, a pressure plate, and a redstone torch. Not exactly complicated. So what we'll do, we will just pop our redstone torch. Where do I want my pressure plate to be? I think I want it there. That will be fine. So I can pop the pressure plate onto the block, which has just got this redstone torch connected to it. Then I can place my dropper on top of the torch. Yep. That's facing in the wrong direction. Come back here. Go that way. There we go. Right. So now when I remove this block from the back, because you are in the way, what I should be able to do is I can surround you with glass, so that what you spit out doesn't disappear. I can put some birch planks in there, because birch planks are nice and cheap. I'll chuck the first one down. The flower will eat it. Wait! And you're supposed to spit another one out, but I'm not supposed to pick it up. There, let's stop me doing that. There we go. So now every time the flower eats one of those planks, the dropper will just spit another one out for us, and it'll just sit on the pressure plate until it gets taken. And one thing you'll notice though is that, that is burning through the old planks, isn't it? This is certainly a hungry little flower. It is going to munch away quite quickly. Of course, if I give the dropper something with more burning power, whether that's blocks of coal if I fancy being really expensive, or charcoal, then of course it won't eat through them so quickly because they have a longer burn time. But that then just makes it rather expensive when it comes to charcoal. So this is very much a temporary setup just to get these things started. Eventually we will be able to get flowers that are much easier to feed and much easier to generate mana from. This is very much just the beginning. For now though, I think that is where I am going to call this episode. For progress, we're not doing too badly. We have got mana being generated. I've made an awful mess around here. This definitely needs cleaning up. It is a right state, but I can get on with that while it's off camera, and we can let that mana pool build up a little bit to become something rather more substantial. And then next time, we can put it to use. Anywho though, as the sun starts to set around here, I think I'm going to call that an episode. Happy Minecrafting everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!